This episode is in partnership with Fantasy WSL, the biggest fantasy game in women's football. Fantasy WSL is where you can manage your own squad and earn points for real-life performances. Rise through the ranks in leagues against your friends and fellow managers. Keep up to date with the WSL results and fixtures with game week and live match notifications. Head to fantasywsl.net or download the app from your app store and get started today. Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, a podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. We've got a lot to get through today. There was a big result at the top of the table in a London derby. There were goals galore in the Midlands. Leicester scored some goals and we've also got some transfers to get our teeth into. I'm going to be giving you all the stats and all the numbers you need. I'm your host, Sam Decodino. Yes, welcome listener. It is... Well, the first half of this podcast, anyway, it is Monday the 27th of January as I'm recording. I'm a bit of a busy man this week, so you're going to hear a little bit from me today and then a little bit from me that will be recorded on Wednesday. So if I sound a little bit different later in the pod, that is why. As I mentioned, we've got a lot to get through this week. There were obviously 6 games this weekend. There are 6 games coming up next weekend. We're going to be having a look at Fantasy WSL as we normally do. And obviously, it's the transfer window. There's a few transfers that need talking about. But let's start off with having a look back at the weekend's games. There was some mean and magic in the Midlands on Saturday as Viv's wonder goal helped City beat Villa 4-2. Naomi Girma put pen to paper, but it was another pen that did the business for Chelsea on Sunday in their 1-0 win over Arsenal. Crystal Palace came back from a 2-goal deficit, but Spurs put a halt to that with a 95th minute winner from a free kick. Leicester had 2 good wins on Sunday, a good win against Liverpool, and that is thanks to Missy Goodwin's mid goal. Then Shakira was performing in East London as West Ham's new signing scored on her first league start in their 2-0 win over Everton, and Manchester United and Brighton rounded off the weekend with a comfortable 3-0 win for the home team, another clean sheet and another loss for Brighton to kick off 2025. But we're going to start off with the game at Stamford Bridge. Yes, Chelsea won, Arsenal 0. It was the big game of the weekend, a London derby up at the top of the table with pretty big consequences for the league, I think you'll agree. Naomi Girma was announced on the pitch before the match had even started. Chelsea's record signing, the world record signing, but we'll come to her a little bit later on. In this game, Arsenal had a bit more of the ball, 54% of the possession, but Chelsea were, I think, always the ones that looked like winning. Both sides had a few decent chances throughout the game. Chelsea with quite a few late on. 6 big chances in the game for Chelsea compared to none for Arsenal. There was a big moment towards the end of the match. Kim Little taking down Lauren James in the box, which ended up being a penalty. There are a lot of... How can I word this? There's a lot of angst on social media today, especially if you follow any sort of Arsenal accounts or see those sort of things pop up on your feed. People are saying that Kim Little did get the ball in her tackle on Lauren James. As an Arsenal fan, I obviously took a bit of an interest in that. I can see that Kim Little did get a bit of the ball, but she got a lot more of the player. I'm not surprised this was given a penalty at all. I think it's one of those that even if we had VAR in the women's game, this would still get given as a penalty. I think it was the correct decision. I saw there was a red card in this as well. I wasn't watching the game live, I had to watch this bit back. And I was a bit confused because I got told that Kim Little gave away the penalty. I got told that Kate McCabe got a red card. I thought, maybe she's given it to the wrong person or something. But no, when I watched it back, Katie McCabe obviously got a yellow and a red in pretty quick succession. In the midst of the penalty being awarded, she obviously had a thing or two to say to the ref. The thing got her the yellow card and the 2 got her the red. It looks like, from the videos you can see, it looks like she told the ref to F off after getting a yellow card, so immediately got a red. She also had a bit of a go at the 4th official. She was coming off as well. It wasn't really the best behaviour from Katie McCabe. Not something we want to see from professionals in the game. But it's a high pressure situation. It's high emotion. You can kind of understand why she's reacted like that. Albeit, she obviously was the only Arsenal player like that. Behaviour that whether you're an Arsenal fan or not, I'm sure it's not something you really want to see on the football pitch. But Chelsea didn't mind too much. Obviously, they've got A, the penalty out of it, and B, were a player up. Gura Wrighton stepping up off the bench to score her 7th of the season, her second goal from the spot in the WSL. Chelsea are now 7 points clear at the top of the table. There was already a bit of chat beforehand about, is this title already done? I was sort of in the bank of, it's not done, but Chelsea are 90% of the way there. They can relax a little bit. They need to turn up for the big games especially, but they can relax a little bit. If they end up getting the odd draw here and there, they'll be fine. But I think the league now is probably as good as done. They've won against City, United, and obviously now Arsenal. I did see, this is a shout out to Harry Edwards on X where I saw this. No team has ever won the WSL with more than one match to go. Chelsea are obviously 7 points clear with, well, obviously we've still got 10 matches to go now, but if they keep that up, if they keep that lead at least, if they can match second or anyone below that, they're going to be winning it with 2 games to go. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised to see them win it with 3 or 4. I think other teams like your Cities, your Arsenal, obviously they're playing each other next week as well. I think there will be points dropped by the teams chasing Chelsea. I don't think Chelsea are going to drop many points. I don't think they're going to win every match for the rest of the season. They're good, don't get me wrong, but I think this result is almost as good as a cup win for them, or for giving them a cup win, because Bompastor can afford to rotate a lot more in the league now without the risk of losing points. Without the risk of points affecting their league position anyway. If they drop a couple of points here and there because they get a draw, because they played a slightly weaker team than they normally would, that's fine, because they're still going to go on and win the league. And actually they can go ahead and play a better team in Champions League knockout rounds, FA Cup rounds, whatever it may be. And I think that will get them further. So I think this win and giving them that sort of extra bit of distance between them and second place, I think is pretty much as good as giving them an extra cup win this season. I think they're going to probably win at least 2 or 3 trophies. Naomi Girma was officially announced as a Chelsea player, as I mentioned earlier on. It is a world record fee of $1.1 million, or about £900,000. So she is the first $1 million player, not the first £1 million player, but I'm sure that won't be too far away. Probably, depending on what goes on in the summer, may see it this year. If not, I'd be surprised if we don't see it next year. She is, however, unfortunately injured, so not straight into the side. I did get a bit excited as I'm grateful to someone, a couple of people on social media that pointed out to me. I got a bit excited because I was like, she's obviously one of the best players in the world. She's come to Chelsea, come to the WSL. I can get her in my fantasy team. She's going to be a visionary with the visionary points, because obviously no one's picked her at the moment. Was later informed that she is actually injured and will not be facing Villa this weekend coming. So unfortunately, I think that's going to be gone. People enough were, at least 2% of managers, I think, would have put her in, and that'll be gone. The visionary points, but never mind. But yeah, Chelsea 1, Arsenal 0. I think that is probably the league as good as done. We don't really need to focus too much on the title race anymore. There's not really going to be much of one unless Chelsea slip up and get a loss somewhere. But I'd be very surprised if that happened. There will be quite a chase on for the last Champions League spots. Obviously, second and third go through to the qualification phase. That'll be Arsenal, City, and United fighting for that. It's currently very close between the 3. They're currently, I think, 3 teams in about the same kind of space and quality. I can't really sit here now and be like, oh yeah, that team's going to get through and that team's going to drop out, because I don't really know. I'd love, obviously, as an Arsenal fan, I'd love Arsenal to go through, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up 4th and City and United romped through. I think City, when they get people like Bunny Shaw and potentially Lauren Hemp back, doesn't look like they're going to be getting Alex Greenwood back this season, but at least those 2 players is going to make a massive difference to the side. They're going to be scoring a lot more goals. Manchester United the other way, obviously they've got Ella Toone back, who is in the goals already, but their defence is so good. And then Arsenal kind of somewhere in between. I think they've got, of those 3 teams, the second best attack and the second best defence. So it'll just be a case of seeing how it all plays out. And there'll probably be a few times where there's an odd decision here and there, or a deflected goal or something like that, that will win someone a last Champions League spot. I think there'll be 1, 2, maybe 3 points tops between those 3 teams at the end of the season. Let's move on to some of the other results from this weekend. I'm going to move on to the first match of the weekend. It was back-to-back 4-2 matches in the WSL for Man City. This time they won. This one was 4-2 away at Aston Villa. They are back up to third in the table now. Chastity Grant opened scoring pretty early on. I think it was in the first 10 minutes, but then 2 goals from Miedemar made it 2-1 at half time, including a potential goal of the season. If you've not seen it yet, go on YouTube or wherever you watch your highlights, the Women's Football Show, etc. Go and watch it because it is fantastic hit from range. And yeah, I think she was, I don't know why she doesn't celebrate her goals, because I think if anyone else had scored that, they'd be losing their mind. Yeah, fantastic goal. There were 3 goals from City in the second half. Unfortunately for them, the first one was a Leia Alexandri own goal. But then there was yet another wonder strike in this game, this time from Mary Fowler. Fantastic one off her left foot, curling into the top corner, and then Jess Park getting it on the end of a cross to make it 4-2 in the end. It is a losing end to Sean Goater's interim reign as Aston Villa boss, but they have got a new manager coming in, Natalia Arroyo. Hoping I've pronounced that correct. If there's any Spaniards listening that need to correct me, please do. She is someone who was a player. She was a product of La Masia in Barcelona. She left Barcelona at age 20, moved to Espanyol, also sort of within the city of Barcelona. But she retired in 2009, aged just 22, forced to retire through injury. She got into management about 5 years later in 2014, and then started at Real Sociedad in 2020. Highlights including getting second in the 21-22 season and getting a cup final last season. She's been out of management since the summer. She parted ways with the company because she wanted to explore other opportunities. And yeah, after a few months out, she's ended up with Aston Villa. I think it was Counter Press made the point that there's potentially a bit of a link between some of the sort of the Spaniards at Villa. Obviously, Unai Emery isn't the men's manager there. They've got I believe they've got a sporting director or a director of football or whatever their position is there, is Spanish as well. So yeah, maybe there's a bit of a link there. They're trying to do this sort of stuff. But at Villa is where she's signed to now. 3.5-year contract takes her up to the middle of 2028. And I think it's a bit of a statement of intent for Aston Villa to give a manager a contract this long. Obviously, they've had good managers in the past. Carla Ward had a fantastic relationship with the club. Just obviously needed to move on just for personal circumstances, which is absolutely fair enough. Robert De Paul didn't work out. It wasn't going very well. They were putting in good performances, but not getting great results. Hopefully for them, Natalia Arroyo, I'm going to try a few different pronunciations, probably by accident, might be something that will help them turn it around this season, because I think they're okay. They're bottom half. They're probably not going to get relegated, but it'd be useful if they can be a bit more certain in that and get a bit higher up the table. Sean Goater is going to remain at the club just as an attacking coach, but that's nice to see. I think he's been in the women's game for a while now. Obviously, he was at Man City beforehand. This loss against his former club. So nice to see that he's still staying within a coaching capacity. Who knows, maybe he'll go on to an actual managerial, like proper full-time managerial position in the future. The other signing I wanted to focus on from these two teams was Carolyn, who has signed for Man City. I think this is something that I'll probably cover in a future podcast a bit more, but she certainly seems like an exciting addition to the squad in that sort of winger area, potentially the sort of Chloe Kelly replacement, albeit Chloe Kelly isn't really playing at the moment. We still don't know what's happening there. There were rumours that Chloe Kelly was spotted in Manchester United's game at the weekend. Friend of the pod, Connor Roberts, has reliably informed the football world that did not happen. There was just someone that looked a little bit like Chloe Kelly in the crowd. And although there's some interest from Manchester United at the moment, there's no sort of formal talks being held or anything like that. So we'll have to see if anything happens in the next few days. I think off the top of my head, it's Thursday or maybe Friday is the transfer deadline. So yeah, let's see if anything happens before then. Potentially by the time you're listening to this, obviously I'm recording on Monday. Potentially by the time you're listening to this, there's something else that's come out about Chloe Kelly. And this will all be made redundant to be soon to be out of date football news. Let's move on to the next game I had on this weekend, which was Palace 2, Spurs 3. First thing I want to say before I get into this game is I do think that the coverage of women's football is getting better. Obviously, a lot of stuff's being put on YouTube now. We've got stuff on the BBC, on Sky, etc. we're still getting games like this. And I think these are easy fixes because the coverage of this game, from what I saw on the highlights on YouTube, was awful. The poor camera operator and commentator are doing their best, but the storm was playing absolute havoc on the equipment. There was water on the camera in different places throughout the game. There was a lot of crackling on the audio. For the second goal in this game, the audio wasn't even linked up to the video. I think it's all just something that can be improved a bit. I think we're coming a long way, but this seemed like something that didn't need to be that bad. There were other games this weekend taking place at the same time in the storm that the coverage seemed to be fine. So, yeah, they might not have been in exactly the same location as Crystal Palace, but for example, the West Ham game, I watched the YouTube highlights of that as well. That was much better. So, yeah, I'm not too sure exactly why the Palace one was so bad, but there we are. Moving on to the actual game itself. It was a game that can be summed up by a lot of crosses and a bit of a moment of brilliance. So Bethany England netted twice to give Spurs a 2-0 lead at half-time, first heading in a cross and then heading in a corner. She is the first player to score against every team that have played in the WSL. That is a stat that came from the Barclays WSL social media pages. I love that stat. I think it's one of those sort of kind of historic ones. If you're the first player to do something like that, you'll always be remembered for it. And there's not many people that will ever go on to do something like that because, for example, there's probably going to become a time not that far in the future where you just won't have anyone that will have been playing football at the same point that Notts County were in the WSL, for example. So that might end up being something that she takes with her, and she's the only player to ever do. In the second half, Katie Stengel turned in across another one to make it 2-1. Bethany England then thought that she had her hat-trick after scoring from yet another cross, but it was ruled out for offside, I think correctly so. Ashley Veerden, who is a player that I don't think really gets that much coverage, but from the things that I've seen about her, watching Palace games, I think she's a really good talent. I think she's someone that's a bit underrated, and she made it 2-2 after a finish from, you guessed it, another cross. But then in the dying embers, 95th minute, it was a direct free kick goal from the edge of the box. New signing Olivia Holt won it for Spurs. The Palace keeper, I've forgotten her name off the top of my head. I haven't written it on my notes. Very sorry. But she made her debut in this game. Unfortunately, she just couldn't get anywhere near it. It was a really good free kick to win it for Spurs. And that is now 5 losses in a row for Palace. And they are now 4 points adrift at the bottom of the table. The first few weeks this season, I made a bit of a song and dance about the fact that the sort of relegation race was really good this year. We had 5 teams in it at the start. Sort of dwindled away a bit, and actually we've ended up with a few teams that are still close together, but one that's unfortunately drifting away. If Palace continue this run of form, it's going to be a bit of a boring rest of the season because we know who's going to win the league, we know who's going to get relegated, and then there's not really that much to play for in between unless you're Arsenal, City or United. For Spurs, this game puts them into 6th place and has opened up a 5-point gap on the bottom half, which is important for them. I think they're a team that were, at the start of the season anyway, getting drawn into a sort of, not necessarily relegation scrap, but it looked like they were going to be doing worse than they did last year, finishing the bottom half. But they've got a 5-point gap on the bottom half now. They're catching up with Liverpool. So it's looking kind of a bit more promising for them. Let's move on to the Liverpool game next. It's 2-1 in favour of Leicester at the King Power. This was my first game of the 2025 in the WSL, which was really, really great to be at, really enjoyable to go to. Shannon O'Brien got her first WSL start of the season. Sam Tierney was back from injury too, her first WSL start since the 3rd of November. I think for Leicester, it made a bit of an impact having those 2 players back, especially Shannon O'Brien, just because they've got a focal point up front that is attacking minded. They've obviously had players like Ruby Mace, Yanis Cayman, Takarada playing in that striker position this season because they haven't had any forwards, and they want to keep their wingers on the wing. So it's not been something that's fantastic for Leicester so far this season. That's why they've not scored many goals. But yeah, I think Shannon O'Brien, although she didn't necessarily have the best game, she didn't get on the ball that much. She certainly had the intent and the tenacity that you need from someone leading the line. In terms of how the game actually went, Olivia Smith opened the scoring, charging down Janina Leitzig's clearance about 2 minutes in, probably not even that, blocking it and rebounding into the Leicester net. I say blocking it, she was actually about 5 yards away when I watched it back. I watched the highlights this morning. she was actually quite far away. So I don't know if it can necessarily be classed as a block or just Union Leipzig happened to hit her. But whenever the ball got played back to Leipzig for the rest of the game, she put snow on it. She did not put it out flat at all. She was making sure she was not getting this one blocked again. And it paid off. Obviously, they didn't concede any more after that, after the second minute. Yanis Cayman got one back after 17 minutes. A free kick crossed in by Ruby Mace, nodded down by Sophie Howard, turned in by Yanis Cayman. And then later on in the first half, it was very unselfish play from Sam Tierney. She could have had a shot, but played in Missy Goodwin, set her up, stroke home. The winner that it turned out to be about 5 minutes before half time. In the second half, Leicester didn't really come out the same way they did in the first half. In the first half, I mean, they were losing from 2 minutes in. They had to try and score. But from the start of the second half, it was quite clear that they weren't going to be... If they could get a third goal, great, they'll go for it. But they were just going to try and look to defend. This was actually the first WSL game this season that they've scored more than once. So they probably know that they're not probably going to score 3, because if you can barely score 2, you're going to struggle to score 3. Let's just sit back, do what they do really well. For a team in the bottom half, they're really good at defending. And yeah, see it out for a 2-1 rather than try and score and make it 3 or 4. I want to give a bit of a shout out to Julie Thibault and Sophie Howard. I thought they did great. I think they both made a goal-saving block at some point. Nina Leipzig obviously behind them as well, but yeah, they both put in a great effort. Sam Tierney did really well. So did Ruby May. She dropped back into centre-back for a lot of it. They almost played like a back 5 at times. Yuka Mimiki was great at sort of progressing the play forward. So obviously, because they're sitting back quite deep, and like I mentioned, Ruby Mace was going into a kind of centre-back position, they didn't have that much in terms of outlets and getting the ball out. But Yuka Mimiki did really well, despite her frame. You know, she's quite small. She did really well at shielding the ball and dribbling past players and getting the ball up the pitch. I haven't actually checked the numbers specifically for this, but I'd imagine her progressive carries were quite good in that game. Shannon O'Brien was the other one that I wanted to highlight, because she obviously got her first start of the season, and it was really good to have for Leicester to have a focal point that is an attacker. She probably, if you look at her numbers, she probably didn't actually have that great a game. She didn't get, loads of shots or create loads of chances or anything like that. But something she did do that won't really get picked up in the stats. This is why I talk about some of football you can look at just data, and some of it you need to have the eye test. She did really well at winning fouls in really good positions. Leicester are pretty good in the air. I know Liverpool are as well, but Leicester are also pretty good in the air. So winning in positions where someone like Ruby Mace can whip in a good cross is really important. She was quite good at winning those fouls. Another one I wanted to mention was Julia Bartel. She came on for Liverpool, I think it was about 55 minutes in. And for the first couple of minutes, she looked amazing. She got on the ball a couple of times, and she looked like you just dropped prime Barcelona style player in, which is basically what she is, obviously. And those 55 to 60 minutes, I was like, oh my God, she might change the game here. They might the perfect sort of player to unpick a defence, unpick a lock. But no, she then just sort of disappeared for the rest of the game, which was a bit strange. But Ruby Mace, I think, was potentially my player of the match in this one. She really ran it for Leicester, ran the show. It's becoming a really good breakthrough season for her. I don't think... I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, anyway, to see her move to a bigger club in the summer. I don't think she'll necessarily go to one of the big 4, like a Chelsea and Arsenal, City or United. But Leicester are a team that tend to battle relegation, have done recent times. I can see her moving to someone like a Liverpool or a Spurs that's in that top half, trying to break into the Champions League, especially now that she's got obviously some Lionesses experience behind her. She's obviously made her debut, the first ever England player to play for Leicester. So yeah, they'll do well to keep hold of her in the summer. But I also think that if they do keep hold of her, she's probably a pretty good bet, especially alongside players like Missy Goodwin and Jutta Van Thaler and obviously Thibault and Howard and people like that. If they can keep Ruby Mace on top of all those players, I'd be surprised if they are sort of going to get relegated in a future season. She could be the difference between them getting relegated and staying up. Let's move on to West Ham 2, Everton 0. As I mentioned earlier on, Shakira was performing. Shakira Martinez, that is. She scored on her first league start for West Ham, flicking in Vivacé's cross. or corner, I should say. Flicked it in at the near post, past a pretty helpless Courtney Brosnan. Then Vivasay doubled the lead just before half time from the spot. Her second goal involvement of the game, her 8th goal involvement for West Ham this season. For a team in the bottom half, having 8 goal involvements for one single player is very good. I think Vivasay is a player that doesn't get talked about enough. She is someone that consistently has really good metrics, especially for a player at a team like West Ham, in the position of the league that West Ham tend to find themselves in. She is, a good goal scorer. She wins a lot of fouls. She also does make a lot of fouls, to be fair, and gets a few cards, but she's certainly an asset to that West Ham side and one of their better players. And someone that I just don't think gets talked about enough. Something else I want to highlight in this game is that Everton actually had more XG than West Ham in this. They had 2.1 compared to just 1.8 for West Ham, but they didn't actually get a single shot on target. They were creating enough chances to score 2 goals on average, but not even getting a single one on target. So King and Shemik didn't make a single save. They got no post-shot XG at all, or XG on target. I think from that point of view, it's probably just a bit disappointing from Brian Sorenson's side. But West Ham won't mind at all. Obviously, a 2-0 win for them. The final match of the weekend was Man United 3, Brighton 0, and this was, I think, a game to forget for Sophie Baggerly. 3 goals that at least a couple of them she probably should have done better on. The first one was a bobbler from Ella Toon quite early on that definitely should have been dealt with. The next one was a fantastic strike from Miyazawa. She had one shot that got blocked and then it fell to her on her left foot. She hit it so cleanly, so hard. No keeper in the world is going to have a chance at that. A really, really good goal from a player in top form. We'll come to her a little bit later on. The final goal was a Celine Bizet shot from distance. She nutmegged Maisie Simons on the edge of the area, hit it from range. And then this one I found a bit strange because Sophie Baggerly seemed to be in the right position. She was in line with where the ball was going. She was pretty much on her line, but the ball still managed to go over her head and in. I don't really know why. She's not the tallest goalkeeper, but she's tall enough to save that. I don't know how she missed that, but like I said, game to forget for Sophie Baggerly, not one to go on the highlight reel. And it's not been a good start to 2025 for Brighton. That is 2 trips up north now in the WSL and 2 losses. Obviously, they went away to Liverpool the weekend beforehand on the Friday night. They are, after a really good start to the season, after, I guess, kind of overachieving, they are now only ahead of Spurs on goal difference in the league. This is a Spurs side that this season has probably underachieved a bit compared to how we expect them to be going, albeit they are having a good 2025. Long term for Brian, I don't see this as being too much of a worry. I think they'll probably still finish in the top half. I think Daria Vidicic is still going to be put down as having a really good season. I think the signings they brought in, like Paris and Kankovic and Kirby, have still been fantastic. It's a little bit of a blip, but they'll come through it, I'm sure. Man United, however, are on the other side of that. They are having a fantastic start to 2025. It is another clean sheet, another win after obviously beating Man City at the Etihad last week. They are now up to 2nd in the table. Mark Skinner is doing a really good job. Him and his sort of coaching staff, etc., doing a really good job to not just coach the players well, but the tactics as well within the games. I thought that was really impressive against Man City. You could see they've got specific game plans that the players knew what to do and everyone was on the same page. Mark Skinner gets quite a lot of flack when anything's not going right or when one thing comes out that's going wrong. It's normally a bit of a headline around him about Manchester United fans saying he's terrible, let's get rid of him, whatever. You don't tend to get it the other way around, where when Mark Skinner does something good, that he gets much praise. Not from the fans, at least, anyway, which I find a bit strange. I'm not a Manchester United fan. I don't know the ins and outs. I know there are pieces in the past where he's maybe not treating players quite right. The players have come out and, well, not necessarily come out and explicitly said it, but you can sort of read between the lines. I know there was a bit with Ella Toon recently as well about being overworked. But I think it's quite an interesting situation. Manchester United is still a club that I know they're doing really well at the moment. They're probably going to qualify for Champions League football this year, especially if they keep up their great defensive performances. But long term, it does just seem a bit of a red flag with Skinner that he just doesn't get on with the fans. I don't know the ins and outs of why, but whatever the reason is, it doesn't seem like a great thing long term. And obviously, upper management Sir Jim Ratcliffe and people like that are just not prioritising the women's team at all. So Manchester United are doing great for now. I think they're almost overachieving, if anything, given the situation that they're kind of in. And I think they're going to deteriorate a little bit over the years. They're not going to go and get relegated in the next 5 years, but I don't think we're going to continue to see them be a Champions League side, not as long as they're sort of prioritising or not prioritising the women's team in the way they're doing at the moment. The final thing I wanted to mention on Man United was Grace Clinton, because she once again did not start. They've got a midfield three now that Ella Toon's back. She's playing alongside Dominique Janssen and Hinata Miyazawa in midfield. That seems to be going really well. And if it's not broken, why would you fix it? Even if you've got one of the best parts to fix it, Grace Clinton is a fantastic player. I think she's one of the best midfielders in the league. She's got really good sort of progression numbers with her carries and things like that, and creativity. But she's also got really good defensive numbers with her blocks and interceptions and tackles. She's great at both ends of the pitch. She's a great box-to-box midfielder. She seems like a really sort of a teammate you'd love to have, because she gives a lot more than she gets. But yeah, like I say, they've got a good thing going. They're not going to ruin it at the moment. It'd be interesting to see how long this lasts. With any other team, I'd be like, well, eventually someone's going to get injured or have some bad form or something, or there's going to be a bit of rotation. She'll be back in. But we know with Mark Skinner, he doesn't tend to rotate that much. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Grace Clinton this year. They've obviously extended her contract. Now, some people might think that is purely because she's a great player and they want to keep her. I think there's an element, I think that's true, but I think there's also an element of, if she's not getting the pitch time she wants, and if she's still performing at a really high level, other people are going to want to come in and take her. Whether that will be someone like Spurs, or maybe it's someone abroad, or maybe it's one of the other big three within the WSL, who knows? But yeah, I'm not ruling out the fact she's going to stay at United. She probably will, but I think there's just something in the back of my mind that's thinking she might end up leaving, especially if she stays on the bench a lot. Anyway, that is the roundup for this weekend's games. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to have a look forward to the games coming up this weekend. Hello, listener. Welcome back to Decoding the WSL with me, Sam Stattorino. We are looking ahead now to the games coming up this weekend. And I'm going to start off with what is almost certainly the biggest game of the weekend, which is Man City against Arsenal. These are two teams that are chasing down a Champions League spot. Man City are obviously slightly better positioned to be doing that at the moment, just because they're higher in the league. But I'm intrigued to see how this game goes. I do think Man City have a better 11 than Arsenal, but I think Arsenal have a better squad. I think once you get past some of the sort of the major players at Man City, you think your Miedema, your Shaw, your Lauren Hemp, your Alex Greenwoods, Joe Rord, I could put in that bracket as well. Once you get past those players, I don't think they've got that much quality in their squad compared to Arsenal. Compared to the rest of the league, yeah, they're still a top four, at least, team. Compared to Arsenal, I don't think they've got squad depth. But they've got players coming back now. Obviously, Viv Miedema is in form. She scored twice at the weekend. Bunny Shaw came off the bench. TBC, see whether she'll start against Arsenal or not. In terms of how I think this game's going to go, I'd love, as an Arsenal fan, to just be like, oh, yeah, we're obviously amazing. We're going to do really well here. But I'm not that confident. I think Man City, although they lost against Manchester United in sort of their last big game, I do think they are a team that's getting, when they've got players like Viv Miedema coming back into form, obviously against their former side as well, a team that she'll want to make a bit of a statement in playing. And Bunny Shaw's coming back as well. Who knows if Miedema might get pushed back into midfield or something. We don't know yet. But I think Man City might actually edge this game, even though Arsenal are doing pretty well at the moment. They only lost to Chelsea with a late on penalty, and then a few, didn't concede that many big chances until after that penalty as well, when they were obviously down to 10. I do think Man City are going to probably just about edge this game. I think I can imagine this being 1-1 until, 70, 80 minutes in. And City at the end, I think, will probably take the victory. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory in that game. Next up is Brighton against Palace. These are two teams that are yet to pick up a point in 2025. They are two teams that are 0 from 2 so far. Brighton are having their first WSL home game of the year, and to be honest, I think they're going to have a win. We've already spoken about Palace losing their sort of last 5 WSL games. They're starting to get a bit of a gap between them and 11th, which they won't want, but I'm not sure I was going to say this derby, the worst derby in football, Brighton Palace, is not really a derby. They're miles apart. I'm not sure this is going to be that close a game. I don't think this is a game where Palace are going to be looking to pick up points. Probably more when they play people like Everton's and Leicester and West Ham. That's where they're going to be picking up points, if any. Brighton, I think, are just going to have too much quality. I think they might actually be able to shut Palace out as well. Palace, considering where they are in the league, they do actually score a decent amount of goals within games. Obviously, we saw them score twice against Spurs at the weekend. I don't think they're going to score against Brighton. I think Brighton just going to have a bit too much for them defensively. I think Brighton are going to sort of have a bit of a kick up the arse after their first 2 matches. And now they're at home, they're going to be a bit more comfortable. They're going to, be against, let's be honest, a worse team than Liverpool, Manchester United in Crystal Palace. I think they're going to see it out. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Brighton victory. The next game is Everton-Leicester. This is one that I think towards the end of the season, we could look back at this game. And if one of these two teams is getting relegated or misses out by less than 3 points or 3 points or less, we could be looking at it and saying this is actually a game that changed their season. Everton are a team that I think have been not that great in the first half, but they've got a lot of good first half of the season, but they've had a lot of good January signings. I'm not sure they've all necessarily bedded in yet. I think they still need a bit of time to gel, but the longer they play together, the better they'll start to get. Leicester are a team that are really good defensively. We saw that at the weekend against Liverpool. They obviously had a pretty poor goal to concede early on, which was like a deflected clearance. But since then, after that, they just really set up shop really well. Liverpool didn't get many chances, especially in the second half. They didn't really look to score. They just defended. They did really well against Chelsea in that as well. I think with Leicester players getting back to fitness, like their forward players, we saw Stattorino come back on. We saw Shan O'Brien get her first start of the season. We saw Sam Tierney have her first start since injury. I think they're getting to the point where they can start scoring more goals. We saw them score 2 against Liverpool the first time this season. They've scored 2 in a game. I think it was their first win since October in the league. So they've got a bit more confidence in that sense, especially with a win against, the other Scouse team. I don't know if Leicester are necessarily going to go and score 2 or more goals in this game because, as I've said many times before, I think Everton do have the best goalkeeper in the bottom half of the league in Courtney Brosnan. And Everton are slowly getting that just a little bit better each week. I think both teams are going to be up for it. There could be a winner. There might be a goal in it, but I think realistically it's probably going to be a draw. I'm going to go for 1-1. Then the next one is Liverpool-West Ham. Both of these teams have 3 points from their 2 WSL games in 2025. This is Matt Beard going up against his former side. West Ham had, a pretty bad first game of 2025, obviously getting thrashed by Chelsea, but I think that was more Chelsea than it is West Ham causing that. They then beat Everton at the weekend, which is a really good result for them. I think Rhian Skinner is really good, as is Matt Beard, to be fair. They're both really good managers at making teams more than the sum of their parts. Both of these teams do have good players. They both have international players. They both have a lot of experience in their sides. They both have a few youngsters coming through. But they're not particularly supported by their clubs. Liverpool certainly aren't. If you look at how well supported the men's side are compared to the women's. West Ham, there's a bit more complications, especially with the stadium, things like that. But they're still not particularly supported. I think their wage budget is the lowest or second lowest in the league, or from what I've read online anyway. So these are two teams that I think are, managed really well, not just on the day, but generally with rotation, things like that. I think Liverpool are probably going to win this game. There'll probably be a goal in it. That's my prediction. I've been umming and ahhing whether to go for 1-0 or 2-1, but on the spot, I'm going to go for a 1-0 Leicester win. Liverpool win, sorry. Just read Leicester as I was reading that. The penultimate game of the weekend is Aston Villa against Chelsea. This is obviously the first game for Aston Villa's new manager. The first game for Robert Powell was also Chelsea against Aston Villa. If you remember that earlier in the season, I think that was his first game. Aston Villa actually almost getting a good result out of that. They almost had their goalkeeper scoring as well at the end of the match. That would have been good, wouldn't it? Would have been something to look back on, but as it was a 1-0 loss. This time, I think Chelsea will probably shut them out again, not necessarily because Aston Villa are rubbish. I think they're actually really good. I think they've got really good squad depth as well, but Chelsea just are on another level to not just Aston Villa, but I think to the rest of the league, obviously other than Leicester that they drew to. Bonpastor's side is continuing to impress, and there is no sign of them slowing down. I don't think they need to go and thrash Aston Villa. I think they've got other games coming up. They probably won't. Sonia probably won't, leave her 100% best 11 on for the whole game of this. So I think they'll slow down a bit, but I'm going to go for, I don't know, 2 or 3 now. I'm going to go 2-0. I'll be nice to Villa. 2-0 to Chelsea in this game. The final game of the weekend is the Grace Clinton derby, the Martha Thomas derby, and there's a few other players I think that are also fit into this. It's Spurs against Man United. Both teams have had a really good start to 2025, winning both of their WSL matches. Spurs have looked really on the up. Bethany England, obviously, as we spoke about earlier, she was the first player to score against every WSL side, potentially the only player that will ever do that. And yeah, I've heard a little bit because I've been listening to other podcasts. It's now Wednesday, by the way, if I hadn't already mentioned. If you hadn't heard the sound change at all. But I've been listening to some other podcasts this week, and there's a few people that are saying that if she keeps this up, Beth England might be in contention to get back in the England squad. I wouldn't rule that out, to be honest. She's the second top scorer in the league now with 7, only behind Bunny Shaw, who is Bunny Shaw. I don't think we need to say too much about that. But yeah, she's the second top scorer in the league alongside Guru Wrighton as well, and someone else who I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it might be Leslie Russo. But yeah, I could definitely see her getting back into that England squad if she continues to keep this up. I don't know whether she definitely will, but go for it. Why not get England back to England? I don't think she's going to score loads of goals in this game. Manchester United, we know, have the best defence in the league. They've only conceded more than 1 goal in a game once this season, and I don't think this game is going to be any different. I actually think they're going to shut out Spurs. I think they are a team that's well suited to playing against Spurs, and sort of the way that Manchester United kind of want to dominate the ball that little bit more. I think Spurs are going to be defending quite a lot, and when they seem to defend, they're not that great on the counter. They're better when they've got a bit more build-up, I think. So I think Manchester United's defence will continue, to inspire them to the clean sheets and the victories that they are doing this season. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Man United win. I don't think they're going to run away with it. I don't think there's going to be loads of goals, but they've got a few players in goal-scoring form. Elizabeth Turlin's been getting quite a few assists recently. Obviously, Miyazawa's in really good form, and Ella Toon. That goes without saying. So yeah, a 1-0 Man United win away at Spurs is what I'm going for. Right, we're going to take one final break, and then we're going to go on to our Fantasy WSL segment. Hello, listener. Welcome back to Decoding the WSL with me, Sam Biccarino. We are on to talking about Fantasy WSL again. It is, a part of the pod I love. The wonderful people at Fantasy WSL have sent me over a bit of information as well that's not quite in the public domain for me to share with you about what happened in Fantasy this week. So I'm going to be selfish, have a look at my team first, which I do because I feel like that's something I want to do every week, not because I want to do it this week, because once again, I've been a bit mid. I got 52 points this week. It was, I think, slightly above the average, but I didn't really have a lot of good returns. I only had one player that got double figures. That was Jill Rord, and that was only because I captained her. She got 10 points. Out of my back 5, I paid 5 defenders this week. Only one of them got a clean sheet, which was my Letitia. I did have Valentinas Joyce in goal as well, which helps. But yeah, not a great week. I'm going to need to make some transfers. So to put me to shame before I get on to the transfers, I want to have a little shout out for the team of the week. You can find this on the Play Fantasy WSL social medias. Team of the week was Aditya D, and her team name is PTJ91, and she got 109 points this week. That is a crazy amount. And something that you don't see that often is she made the right captain. One of her, joint highest scoring player was the captain this week. She had Fallon Tullis-Joyce in goal, getting 6. Janssen and Bright got clean sheets in the defence, alongside Kasparai and Nuke Denton, who also got a clean sheet, obviously. They're Jill Rord, Gura Ryton, Ella Toon, and Katrina Gorry, and Fuka Nagano as well in midfield. And then Beth England, Asai, and Mary Fowler, each getting 12 points in the front three, and obviously Mary Fowler being captained as well. So I think the front three there were only actually 4 points behind my entire team. Yeah, not great. Bench boost was activated on this one. So as I mentioned, Nagano, Kasparai, and Denton, as well as Lisa Kopp, who were named on the bench for Aditi D, they were all points that were added on. That was an extra 13 points there. But 109 points is a really good score, especially on a week where the average score this week wasn't that high. There were a lot of sort of the highly used players that weren't scoring very well. Leslie Russo didn't get many points. I think a lot of people still have Bunny Shaw. I think a lot of people still have Johanna Ritten-Kannerid as well. Maybe a few people have Lauren Hemp, those sort of people not getting that many points. So, or Elizabeth Turland as well, not getting that many points recently, more for assists than goals. So, yeah, well done, Aditya. Yeah, something that I hope to emulate one day. Not this week, got over double my score. There were really good visionary scores this week as well. So for those that don't know, visionaries are something that have been brought into Fantasy WSL this season. As someone that's played FPL for a long time and has been playing Fantasy WSL since it started last season, I really like this. I've not seen it anywhere else before in any other fantasy games, but it's a really good idea. If a player is owned by less than 2% of fantasy players at the start of the game week, they have the potential to earn extra points for being a visionary in the following week. They will get extra points if they get a return outside the minutes. So if they just play for a total of 60 minutes, you don't get any bonus for that. But if they get a goal or an assist or a clean sheet or anything like that, that gets them extra gets them extra points, they will get bonus points for being a visionary player because you are a visionary for selecting them. The top visionary player this week was Katie Stengel with 13 points, outscoring pretty much everyone. In fact, potentially every other player this week. I haven't actually checked that, but I will do. But if I don't correct it, let's have a look while I'm on, because I think I might have it just here. Yes, she was the highest scoring player in game week 12 with 13 points. And only 1.6% of people had her selected at 5.6 million. I guess when you're playing for Crystal Palace, you're probably not a player that loads of people are going to select. But Katie Stengel, she's got some WSL experience behind her, and she obviously did really well this season, this game as well. Hinata Miyazawa was another player who I was quite surprised to find out was a visionary. But she racked up 12 points this week. Verena Hanshaw from West Ham, she got 10. She's obviously a new signing. Camilla Sayers and Ashley Virden got 9 points each, as did Olivia Holt, who scored that free kick for Spurs. And there were 5 players that got 8 points. Sam Tierney, Amber Tiziak, Molly May Sharp, Maita Oroz, and Shakira Martinez, all getting 8 points, all visionaries. So 11 players there that were visionaries that got 8 or more points this week. Visionaries are definitely something that I'd recommend keeping an eye on. I've done quite well this year out of keeping an eye on the visionaries, see who they are, see if there's anyone that's worth picking. I'm normally relatively average at fantasy games, but this year I'm still in the top 100, which I'm amazed at. And yeah, I think part of that is through looking at the visionaries. So make sure to keep up to date on them. You can find all the information on visionaries on the Fantasy WSL app or on the website. Taking a look ahead towards game week 13, I haven't actually made a decision about what I'm going to do with my team yet, because I'm going to wait until some of the cup games that are being played tonight have been played, because it's only lunchtime at the moment. So once they're done, maybe tomorrow or Friday, I'll take a look and make some transfers. I'm probably going to be rotating some of my Chelsea players because Sondy Baltimore doesn't look like she's starting at the moment. Might put one of the defenders like Millie Brighton, someone like that. Might take some of the Man City players out, seeing as they're playing against Arsenal this week. I'll have a route around, but taking a look at what has already happened, some of the biggest transfers so far, the biggest transfers in this week are Ella Toon and Viv Miedema. They are, well, Ella Toon has been transferred in by around 1,700 people. Viv Miedema just over 1,600 people. They are two players that are in form at the moment. They're both scoring goals. Ella Toon is getting extra points as well because she's listed as a midfielder, so she gets more points for a goal than a forward does. And I'm not surprised that people are transferring them in. They're quite high value players, but not the highest value. So if you're taking out people like Alessia Russo or Bunny Shaw or Lauren Hemp, if you still got her in your team or someone, you're freeing up the budget to put in someone like an Ella Toon or a Viv Miedema. The third most transferred in player this week is actually Olivia Smith. She obviously scored at the weekend, although I'll be honest, she wasn't a player that is particularly on my radar to transfer in. She does play a lot. She seems to play through getting injured. If you've been on X in the last few days, you might have seen a post from, I think it's Olivia Smith's dad, I'm not quite sure, but posting some of the pictures of her legs that she took after the game and against Leicester. I think it's from the game against Leicester anyway. It was only posted this week, and sort of the big bruises and things on her legs. Matt Beard has already spoken about the fact that she's not particularly protected. And I think she's an injury waiting to happen. So she's not someone that I'm planning to transfer in. I've actually already got Cornelia Kapox because I think as well as being a visionary, she's someone that I think will sub in for Olivia Smith if and when she gets injured. But Smith's in for now. She's got West Ham this week. I've obviously backed Liverpool to win this game. She's had just under 800 people transfer in already. And she's quite cheap considering how many points she's got. She is quite cheap. It's just a case of taking a look at Liverpool's fixtures and seeing how long you think she'll last. Because I do think she's going to be out for injury at some point. Now, the transfers out this week, the three players that have been transferred out the most, the top one is, as I've already mentioned, her on the pod this week already. It's Grace Clinton. 1,300 people have already transferred her out. I think that's definitely the right thing to do. I transferred her out last week or the week before because, she's just not getting paid. There's players at Man United that I think are doing better. Manchester United are a team that I have three players from. I've had Valentinus Joyce, Maya Letitia, and Ella Toon. I'd recommend having Manchester United players in, but while Grace Clinton isn't getting played, why have her in? And as you've seen, Hinata Miyazawa was a visionary this week. I don't know if she's still a visionary going into game week 13, but if she is, she's a much better shout. I'm assuming cheaper than Grace Clinton, and realistically is more likely to play this week and get points. The second most transferred out player is Mara Ramirez at 850, just over 850 transfers out already. It's so hard with Chelsea players. We've all heard of Pep Roulette if you played FPL, because with Pep Guardiola, you never really know what team he's going to put out. Bonpastor's starting to do the same thing. I'm not really sure what to call Sonia Bonpastor's sort of merry-go-round of players that are coming through, but Chelsea players are really hard to have in because you don't know which players are going to play week to week, because it doesn't seem to matter which player she plays. They're going to win anyway. I'm veering a bit away from putting the sort of forward players in from Chelsea because I think they're more likely to rotate, especially when we get later in the season. There's more Champions League games, there's more cup games. Chelsea are trying to, let's be honest, put their better team into those other competitions. They're not necessarily going to be putting their best players into the WSL games, because if they lose a couple of games, they're probably still going to win the league. So, Mara Ramirez, I'm not surprised she's been taken out a lot. And the third highest player to be taken out is Frida Marnham. That surprises me a bit because I kind of assumed that she'd already been taken out quite a bit. She did really well pre-Christmas, but then she's obviously not really hit the same heights this side, largely because she's just not scoring the same number of goals. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think she might have subbed on at the weekend as well. I don't think she actually started the game. She had pretty poor fixtures in terms of playing against Chelsea and then playing away at Man City. So, yeah, Arsenal player. I've only had one Arsenal player win, which was Leslie Russo, because I think whoever she's playing, she can still get a goal. But, yeah, Arsenal players have not been one to go for me anyway recently. I'm not surprised that Frida Marden was someone that a lot of people had. I had her. But over the winter break, I transferred her out, and I can see some more people are doing the same. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do for game week 13. I might take some City players out. I might move my Chelsea players around because I've got Sondi Baltimore, Sjurka Nuskud, and Myra Ramirez at the moment. So I might take at least one of Baltimore Ramirez out, to be honest. I might take some of my City players out as well because obviously they've got a hard game this weekend. Considering putting in some players potentially from Brighton, they've obviously got Crystal Palace at home. I'm expecting them to potentially be the team, other than Chelsea, that's going to score the most goals this weekend. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that is our little Fantasy WSL segment. I'm really pleased to say as well, next week we are, well, if all goes to plan, we are going to have a guest from Fantasy WSL on. I believe it's going to be Izzy, Director of Strategy at Fantasy WSL, on to talk not just about Fantasy WSL, but also about the WSL. She's going to be joining me for the whole pod, which I'm really excited for, to get a bit of her insight generally, but also to really do a bit of a deep dive on Fantasy WSL, and yeah, get a bit more information than just we get on the surface level, because yeah, I love Fantasy WSL. You know that. I've mentioned it once or twice. I think it's a really good addition to the game, the sport. I think it's really helpful for the growth of the game. So yeah, I love what they do, and I'm really excited to have Izzy on. That is the end of the podcast this week. Thank you for joining me, listener. Thank you for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. As ever, if you have enjoyed today's episode, do make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And it does really help if you can give us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping others find the show. And obviously, feel free to share it around. You can follow Decoding the WSL on Instagram. And obviously, for even more stats and insights, follow me at Stattorino on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Enjoy the weekend's football, listener. Thank you again for listening, and I will speak to you at the next one.